In part 1, we discussed Mace Windu and his lightsaber form Vapad, and why Palpatine couldn't overcome it. But are there any Sith or Darksiders who can? Believe it or not, I think there is. There is no counter to the lightsaber form itself. You've got some pretty deft blade work to deal with regardless of how you fight. So high levels of skill with a lightsaber form that focuses on blade-to-blade combat is a prerequisite, no matter what, if you want to win. And not just escape like a sniveling coward. But the state of mind aspect of Vapad can be nullified. There are two halves to the mirror/looping element. Starve one half of what it needs to get going, and Mace has no amp.
Will form a symbiont circle. What happens to one of you will affect the other. You must understand this.
Though that doesn't mean you're out of the woods. He's still unbelievably powerful even without his clever trick, second only really to Yoda and possibly Anakin among the Jedi. So how do you starve the loop? Well, again, speculation and theory time here, but it would make logical sense to assume that if fury, anger, hatred and fear, and all those other dark side emotions feed the fire, remaining calm, focused, and keeping your emotions in check while dueling would be nothing short of a wet blanket. Mace can still relish and enjoy the fight himself, but without you reciprocating, there's nothing for him to redirect back at you. Now, calmness and level-headedness are not often words you associate with the Sith, but there are black sheep among the Order who chose a different tact in combat that might just give them a chance. So who makes this prestigious cut? Our first pick, and the one who we think can actually win, is none other than Sidious's own apprentice, Count Dooku. Dooku is an absolute force to be reckoned with, even in his old age. Based purely on technical skill and discounting the boost from the Force, Dooku is perhaps the greatest lightsaber duelist of his day. Specializing in Form 2 Makashi, a form dedicated to nothing else but lightsaber dueling, Dooku didn't just master this form, he innovated it, much in the same way Mace innovated Form 7, figuring out the weaknesses and shortcomings of the form and developing methods for nullifying them. But what gives this distinguished gentleman a dog in the fight against his old friend is his mentality in combat. Dooku was a firm believer in the execution of refined technique coupled with spontaneous capitalization of opportunity in the moment, over wildly flailing at your opponent trying to bash through them. Looking at you, Sidious. Notice when he duels, he doesn't cackle or turn into a berserker trying to hammer his opponent into submission. He's calm, collected, and fighting with a detached, pragmatic ruthlessness. In other words, unlike most Sith, he keeps his emotions in check and relies on staying focused, looking for small chinks in his opponent's defenses that he can exploit. He doesn't really call on the dark side to help him, nor allow himself to be provoked into a fury. This is why he was overpowered by Anakin when the Chosen One started tapping into it. Anakin literally just battered him into submission with the dark side. Now, Dooku and Mace are pretty close to equals, but where Dooku can win where his master can't is in his mindset. Mace will have nothing to feed his loop with, and must fight Dooku with his own base power alone. Our second pick is also linked to Sidious on the opposite end of the hierarchy, and that is his master Darth Plagueis. Let's put cards on the table here. Plagueis is perfectly capable of losing his rag and cutting loose with the full fury of the dark side behind him. But it is important to note the context of that little hissy fit. Now, Plagueis was caught completely off guard, essentially with his pants down. Had just witnessed his oldest friend executed by Maladian assassins, and believe it or not, Sith can care about other people. They just care about themselves more. He was also then set upon by said assassins who outnumbered him significantly, and were some of the most deadly assassins in the galaxy, sometimes employed to kill Jedi. And finally, he could not bring his lightsaber to bear, necessitating the use of the Force and his bare hands against fully armed opponents. Now, I think it's fair to say that anyone might fight with the fury of a caged animal when the deck is so unfairly stacked against them in this manner. But we also have another confrontation to draw speculation from, and that is the only lightsaber duel Plagueis was ever depicted taking part in, fighting a potential usurper who was not only just as good as him with a lightsaber, but actually better. Now, we only have Plagueis' POV perspective on the fight, but we do have enough information to paint a picture and speculate with a decent degree of accuracy as to how Plagueis conducts himself in a lightsaber duel. So he was bored and found the fight tedious. He was thinking carefully about all factors affecting the duel while simultaneously fighting a better opponent, and he was able to take himself out of his body and puppet it with the Force while he figured out a strategy. This to me doesn't paint the picture of someone releasing themselves into the dark side and unleashing their fury. This is the mindset of a calm and cerebral fighter, one who thinks carefully and remains level-headed, and once again, starves the Vapard loop of what it needs to get going. Now, do I think Plagueis can win? I have to be honest, I'm not sure. He's a lightsaber master, but without further accolades, that kind of just means you've mastered your chosen forms. I mean, the 3 Jedi Mace took with him to face Sidious were lightsaber masters, and, well...
I played it, mate.
But we should consider that Sidious didn't want to fight Plagueis directly, so the moon may have been much better than we are led to believe. And again, like Dooku, Plagueis has a chance because he can avoid the blind fury that consumes most Sith. And even if he did throw his toys out of the pram and start going balls to the wall, Plagueis is a thinker. He's one of the few Sith with a scientific view of the Force. He'd likely deduce what is happening and back off to regroup. Not super confident Plagueis could take Mace out though. He's not one for combat like Dooku, but he can definitely still handle himself. What do you guys think? Let us know down in those comments. And our third pick before we yield the floor to you guys? Well, as we previously said, Darth Bane would certainly be a slave to the loop. Orbilis-covered Bane, forget about it. But what about his apprentice? Now, this one is likely the most controversial, as Darth Zana kind of needs to call heavily on the dark side in order to do anything useful combatively. But she doesn't need to call on her raw anger and hatred to cross sabers. Zana was slight, physically frail, and possessed very little aptitude for physical combat, or a warrior spirit in general really. She was a trickster, one who relied on misdirection and toying with the mind of her opponent through Sith sorcery. As a duelist, Zana was trained to do one thing, and one thing only: defend herself. Now, this all comes down to how you interpret how Vapard works. Do you believe that Mace feeds off of the dark side itself being called upon? Essentially the ambient energy that permeates around Sith when they tap into it? Or do you believe he can only channel the power that is literally thrown his way through the opponent's channeling of emotions that are amped by the dark side? I'm inclined to believe Mace can only redirect the energy that is channeled directly at him. Otherwise, it wouldn't be too far of a stretch to say that Mace just plain old uses the dark side, which doesn't make sense. Unless Mace lied to everyone about the dark side not touching him. Out of our 3 picks though, even if Zana can nullify Mace's trick, I doubt she actually has the skill to take Mace mano a mano. Her spells and illusions aren't likely to affect him, as he's quite literally the Jedi's embodiment of headstrong. She'll either end up stonewalling him until he pushes through her defenses, or she might be lucky enough to hold him off long enough to escape. Do you think she's got it? Let us know down in those comments, guys. And I know we said we'd yield the floor to you guys, but we have one more honorable mention and then you guys can throw in your suggestions. And that is another Sith linked to Sidious, his final apprentice, Darth Vader. Now, Vader is a tricky one because he has inconsistent showings in his mentality, which actually makes him one of the more realistic fighters. One minute he's calm and ruthless like Dooku, using psychological warfare and the environment to his advantage, and the next he's a furious berserker who will stop at nothing to cut you down in blinding rage. And now we yield the floor to you guys. Can you think of any Sith that can counter Vapard and force Mace into a fair 1v1? Remember, this is not a discussion of who could win against Mace, but which Darksiders can overcome his unique tricks. Let us know your thoughts down below, guys. We love the discussion. And that's our take. What did we get right, what did we miss, and what did we get wrong? I'm sure you'll have no problem telling us. Thanks for watching, guys.